here? Nope, still can't hear you. Can you hear me just fine? If you cannot, let me know that we can hear you just fine. Okay. I don't know. Okay, I'm probably gonna have to connect with a second device.
Recording in progress.
Hi, can So I think my session is fine because I can hear myself echo. So I'm not sure if it's on your end. Because you can hear me, I can hear myself through a second device. Let me try rejoining again and see. Hi, can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Oh,
Cyprian, I can hear you. It's Elinam who's, I think the speaker isn't working or something. I need to unlet her.
Okay, so I can hear you as well. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Ellie, we can hear you. Elinam. I think it's back now. Try again.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, better.
Oh.
Yeah. Great. Okay.
Wait, so all the things I said before, you didn't hear it?
Not at all.
I gave a whole speech. I gave a whole
Thank you.
speech.
Yeah. So I think Cyprian is all set too.
Yes. Okay. All right. So I gave a whole rundown of how today is going to go. I mentioned that Cyprian had gracefully in the past in the last week giving us his thoughts and opinions on what was wrong when it came to operations management in Africa in general. And then today he was going to grace us again with his presence and then take some questions from us on our operational issues. I did mention that I already have some questions from the online community. They came in very, very strong. So, but then because you are on the Zoom call, you're special, and I'm going to give you the opportunity to ask all your operational questions to Mr. Cyprian. And then once the Zoom community is done with their questions, I will go into the online questions that we received from our online followers. So if you have any questions, just raise your hands and I will give you the opportunity to ask Ed the question. In the meantime, Ed, you're welcome. Hi.
Hi, thank you. I've been here. I should be saying you're welcome to you.
in here. It's just my my tech wasn't working. How has your week been? All good?
It's been all right. It's been just fine. A little restful and a little productive.
I like that. I like that. Okay. So online community, Ed. Today we're gonna have two people, two groups of people asking questions. We have an online community earlier that asked their questions through the DMs, and then we have people on the Zoom call today that might have questions.
Okay.
So, in all fairness, for those that are on the live call, I will give them the opportunity to ask their questions first, and then if they're done, then we can go into the online community. So, to my Zoom people, if anybody has any questions, can you raise your hands now? Any questions on operations management in your business, in the business that you work for, in the startup that you are working in, or on the idea that you think you're going to develop? Give it a minute. If you don't, I have a boatload of questions here to ask, so I'll just jump straight into my questions. Okay. You can unmute and ask the question also if you want to ask directly. It's a minute, almost gone. Boom, the minute is gone. Okay, I'm gonna go into my questions. I'm so excited to ask these questions. And the first question, Ed, that you have here is from, well, I don't have the name, but it says, I am a beads maker and retailer. I sell on Instagram and in a small shop in Circle, Accra. Business is good and my profits are great, but I want to know the key operational areas I should focus on to sustain my business and any ways I can reduce my cost to produce.
I really wish the person was here to kind of like get a little more detail on what they're trying to. So they're a beads maker and retailer.
Yes.
Business is good, but they're just trying to figure out how to reduce their. Can you read the ending of that?
I want to know the key operational areas I should focus on to sustain my business and ways I can reduce my cost to produce.
Okay, so there's several folds to it. So I guess, we can take a look at it directly from an operational point of view, but there's several different folds when you say to sustain the business. In terms of sustaining the business in general, you might want to have a better understanding of your target customers and see how you can probably broaden that or how you can penetrate the market a little more. Because I'm presuming there's more than just you as a bead maker and retailer. So essentially, how do you penetrate a market that probably already exists, or how do you create a market for what that doesn't already exist? So essentially, how do you reach out to people that don't even know that they may need or want your product as well? But beyond that, on the operational side, if you're already making the beads, the question is, are you making them custom to order, or do all the beads necessarily have to be unique in terms of what you're making? Once you have a better understanding of that, even if it's custom to order, are there any aspects of the beads that can be pre-made or pre-purchased? Do you have the capital to kind of like pre-purchase or pre-make some of those in advance? And also, because if you do have the capital to kind of like purchase several beads at once, I'm presuming you can have the advantage of buying in bulk where the price cost is also different. The question is where you also sourcing your beads from. If it's not directly from the manufacturer or the source, do you have access to that, or are you buying in large quantities enough to be able to leverage that? But if none of those are in play, first understanding what are your margins on your current beads right now, and potentially what can you leverage in terms of reducing those margins? Because when you say you're a bead maker, I'm curious if you're making them yourself, or if you have a team as well that is working with you. If there's a way you can attribute for their time It's going towards making the beats as well. That will kind of give you a good sense of like where you stand in terms of the actual cost for the beats you sell, and then also your customer acquisition as well. In general, how much is it costing you to acquire a customer? If you're just doing word of mouth or people are chancing by your store, the cost may not be as much. But then just understanding those variables and understanding, okay, if I change my approach towards customer acquisition, if I go online, for instance, and I try to draw more people to send me DMs through my social media page, for instance. So that's what I'm saying. At the end of the day, operational is just going to have to give you the underlying areas you can start exploring. And then you start going to different things like marketing strategies and different things along the side. So the operation is really just questioning what is it costing for you to get that product? What's the process to get that product to the customer? And then once you identify that, is there room to improve the costing and the process? And then you'll be able to sustain your business, because you're looking at just sustaining and not necessarily growing it as well, right? But one other way to sustain in terms of operation is diversification. Is there anything else you can leverage in terms of, I already mentioned, can you leverage different customer markets that you've probably never leveraged before? So if you're a direct to consumer where you have a shop, you said in Circle, can you leverage an online presence as well if you don't already have one? Or can you leverage some sort of I guess, affiliate program where you can have other people kind of like distribute on your path and then they earn something else as well. So where your margins are also still protected in that. So there's different avenues to kind of like sustain it. But when you're looking from an operational, you first need to understand clearly what is it costing me to get my beats to the customer all the way from making it. And then the human capital that's going in, so it be hours associated with each. And once you identify that, you have a better idea of your margin per bead per bead sold. And then you have a better idea of where you can look to improve, more or less.
Great answer. I pray they're listening, but then also we'll post it on Instagram, so then they will definitely hear this. It's a great answer on both sides of the question. The second question is, I run a printing press in 2 locations, one in Accra and one in Tema. What can you suggest I put in operationally to help me manage both locations without shuffling both ways? Sometimes I have to go back and forth 4 times to make sure clients' orders are finished on time.
So why is this person shuffling both ways in the first place? So I guess my question to them is, what's the process they already have in place? What's the process they already have in place to track the workload or the customer's work in each facility, and to even understand what is completed? For instance, you can have simple processes like even WhatsApp if you don't want to. So from the way you're describing it, you're starting up or you're a small business and you don't necessarily need to increase your operational cost. So you can have simpler operations like maybe a WhatsApp group chat that supports one entity, unless you don't have any. I'm presuming you have people working for you, because if you're jumping back and forth, it means you're just going there to support. So if you had a WhatsApp group, for instance, for each entity separately or joint, whenever you can have a certain standard in which you know the status of each job. If a job comes in, it's pushed in there in a certain format. If work has begun on it, it's probably flagged with in progress. If there's an issue, it's flagged as well. But at the end of the day, you need to clearly understand why you're jumping back and forth. And from what I am guessing and deducing, it's more so you're jumping back and forth because you are not able to guarantee the quality of the print jobs. I'm saying this as well because at some point in time, I also did have a printing press as well. So for the most part, the only reason you have to go into space is to guarantee the quality of work. So then the question is, the customers, not the customers, the people that are working for you, are they aware on what your standards are? Because sometimes people would want to say, okay, this printed out. I don't want to reprint it, so let me just put it in that the customer is not going to notice, right? So you have to have some certain standards clearly defined as part of your expectations on your employees, and you have to have a way to kind of like potentially track those standards. So maybe in the meantime, when you're not available, any job that is going out, you can randomly request them to send you like a quick copy, not of everything, they just like pour it out and kind of send you a copy of the spread. If it's a lot, kind of like look at what's going on. If it's a consistent client, you can typically also follow up with your clients, just make sure everything is good in that form, in that side. But if you have to also go back and forth, then probably scheduling your day a little better would also make sense. I know there's a randomness to how some of these jobs come in, but you can probably do a one trip a day and head it towards your home. So if you live in Tema, then you can start off in Accra and then come back to Tema. And then just try to maybe set up the businesses where they're not all open up in the morning. Maybe one is opening at 10 in the morning and the other is opening maybe around 12. If for some reason both of them, these are very difficult to kind of like solution for, because I really need to know why you're going back and forth in the first place, right?
He said to make sure client orders are finished on time.
On time. So it's a question of time. So there you don't even have to go back and forth. If you have a process in place, every time an order is in, we have this Excel sheets. We put the order in. You can quickly come up with a quick math equation on the Excel that when this timestamp is here and this timestamp is after 15 minutes, flag this, send me an email or something with Google Sheets, for instance. And then you know, okay, this job has taken more than 15 minutes since it's been inserted. And you can call them and then kind of like follow up on it. So it's about having a process to track what is behind and what's on time. And even if they forget to close the job, you will still get some sort of an alert to know what's going on in that sense. Yeah, because by the time you get there, if the job is already 15 minutes late and it's what, Accra to Tema, you're probably already an hour late. So you've not really solved for anything at that time.
Okay, thank you so much on that question. Because we've done 3 questions, I just want to remind all the new entrants into the Zoom conversation that today we're talking to Ed Cyprian and he's taking questions on operational issues. All Zoom participants have priority over the online questions that we have received. So if you have any questions that you wanted to ask Ed on operations management, just raise your hand or drop it in the chat box if you don't want to talk, and we'll ask Ed on your behalf. But since I haven't received any questions yet or haven't seen any hands raised yet, I will keep asking the questions that our online participants submitted. Okay, so Ed, thank you for that. The next one is, I run a food catering business. I organize events sometimes, and I try to make sure people pre-book because it's difficult to gauge the numbers correctly, since some people just show up. This is affecting, to gauge the numbers correctly, this is affecting the quantity of food available and the quality of the experience, and also affecting my revenues. What else can I do?
So it's catering, not a restaurant or a fast food. It's purely catering.
Yes.
And people are randomly showing up.
Yeah, I think they're running, you know, those like buffet events where the people pay and come and eat a buffet or something. Seems like that.
Oh, wait, so it's a restaurant?
No. So so they have events where people have to pay to come and eat, like at a specific location, but it's not a restaurant business. So they just cater and have an event.
So they have an event maybe once a week and people pay in advance, but no one is paying in advance and it's kind of affecting the business
Yes.
Oh, that's a tough one. um, if the food that you're producing is predictable, it's not that you're doing a custom order for every single person that is coming to the event. You can do things like prepping in advance and portioning away. But if it's what you described is more of a buffet, presuming it's not a you can still portion away. I think the better approach would be to portion away, because I think in general, when it comes to food, we like to have everything ready to go immediately. No, not ready to go immediately, prepped immediately and then consumed immediately. To some extent, you might have to do some pre-prepping and freezing from essentially a process in the preparation that would allow you to take something and get it out there faster than if you had to start from scratch, because you're having people randomly show and not giving you enough time to kind of like prep. So then you might have to figure a way. So if it's something like, let's say you have fries, you don't necessarily need to fry the yams or anything. You can just kind of like portion them, bag them, put it away. And then it's easier to take that than to get a whole yam and peel it and then clean it up. You save some amount of time in those aspects when someone is coming in. So having that kind of mentality of thinking through a process of what can I do to reduce the time for the people that show up randomly to get food from my kitchen out the door. And then I think that would help you a lot more.
Yeah, sounds awesome. Okay, think about that. Fourth question. I'm a fish farmer and employee. Okay, interesting. I'm a fish farmer and employee. I made 8,000 in losses last September due to operational losses. Now, this person puts operational losses in caps. So operational losses, not in caps, sorry, in quotes. They put operational losses in quotes. As my farmhand will call it. Oh, okay. So I made 8,000 in losses last September due to operational losses, as my farmhand will call it. I live in Accra and my farm is in Adan. Any ideas on IT or systems I can put in place to avoid such stories in my absence?
It's a fish farmer, right?
Yes.
Is that what you said? And
Yes.
made some losses, and they presume it was something else happened. Okay. Another industry that I'm relatively familiar with, have a similar situation with a different farm. There are the technology that helps in fish farming. It's a little tricky, and because I also don't know how that works. So I'm presuming for the most part, how you measure how many fish you have is by weights, not by counting, especially if it's a large scale operation. And you don't necessarily weigh what you have in the farm. You only weigh what goes out of the farm, because I'm not sure how you weigh a pond.
I think you might have expectations of how much each pond should produce.
Correct.
Yeah.
But how to you want to be able to track at what point to solve this problem properly. You need to know at what point are you losing the fish, right? So you have an expectation of how much each pond is supposed to produce, but how do you track if the fish are dying as a result of something else in the pond, or are they actually being taken out of the property and being sold in some capacity or consumed within the property? I can say some solutions, but in my head, I don't see them 100% mitigating the problem with the hands on the farm. But because I don't, if you have no way of recording your capacity in terms of how much fish you have, it'll be very difficult to track that over time. And as far as I'm understanding, you can't necessarily measure the pond. If you have like 10 ponds, you have an expectation of how much it is, but are you harvesting them all at the same time, or are you harvesting them across different times? Unfortunately, truly, I don't feel like I have enough information on this to kind of like provide an adequate solution for it. But at the end of the day, if you want to be able to kind of like measure your capacity, but I find that I see the challenge with that because you can be measuring what is going out of your farm, but you still may not be able to catch what is missing because the person's consuming it right on your farm, actually. You can have a checks and balance, but you wouldn't know until you harvest. Let's come back to this towards the end of this, and let's see if I can think of it better. But yeah.
Okay. All right.
It's a little easier with the farming that I was used to. You can definitely count what you have and keep track of it over time. So.
Okay. We do have Jedediah here. He's a fish farming expert. So.
Oh, perfect. So maybe he can give.
If he can help us out, we would be grateful, Jedediah. Oh, okay. He sent a message. He says, with fish farming, it's best for the farmer to be able to visit the site regularly. He should look at the likes of Triple Farm. They have a manager on site who has a stake in the business. Okay.
So yeah,
that should solve.
There. But I guess the question was still geared towards what technologies can you use to kind of like communicate some of those. But yes, ideally, any business that you can be more present in, you will be obviously catching a little more of the things that are going on that shouldn't be going on. But yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how they can do that without having to visit any more regularly than they're already doing. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So we'll leave this question, and please, if you have any insights to add on to what Ed has shared also, because it's maybe your industry or your specialization, please drop us a comment.
How do I send other questions, or does it come just to you?
Which ones? Yeah, in the chat box.
Okay,
but this one I think he sent to me. Maybe he sent to me.
All right, perfect.
Please make your contributions general so everybody can see it. The fifth question. I sell organic teas. Okay. They are doing well so far. I have 2 farm workers and 4 factory workers. I am certified and licensed by the FDA. What data should I be collecting on my operations in order to scale up? I realize the demand is growing faster than I can supply.
The demand is growing faster than you can supply. That's a good problem. And the question is, what should they do to be able to scale up?
What data should I be collecting on my operations in order to scale up?
That's a good question. Again, another industry that I don't know whoever is coming up with these questions, but another industry that I am involved in somehow. So you do have demand and you want to scale up. The initial question is, how are you? So do they have the farm as well? They have the organic farm?
Yeah, it says I have 2 farm workers and 4 factory workers.
Okay. So they are up the whole vertical from the farm all the way down to, they own that entire chain. So so first of all, do you have data that lets you understand what your farm workers' capacity and your factory workers' capacity is for any given week or month? For instance, if they can yield you 20 packs per week per person, that gives you a good idea, a rough idea of what scaling up will look like for you. And then you then identify, does the cost make sense? Because the more you scale up, then you then have to have more other intermediary players to kind of like manage those different people as well. So first is identifying what is what their capacities are and what that is yielding you in terms of the outputs that they're providing. And once you understand that and you know how much that is retailing for or how much you're selling that for, then you truly know your net profit after you take out your operational costs and your cost to produce as well. Then you have a rough idea of, okay, if I add one more person, does my operational costs substantially go up? Or is it just a mere factor of maybe X that it goes up by? For instance, does it make sense? You have 4 factory workers right now. You have 2 farm hands. I'm presuming the farm hands are able to yield you so much more that you need more factory workers, right? So for instance, if you add just one more farm hand, can they still do the same? Can the 4 factory workers still yield you the same? Can they still be enough for your operations? It's fully understanding what that cycle looks like. And some of the other data is looking at what the factory workers are more or less doing. So there's probably a series of steps that they follow, maybe from, I don't know if you're mixing a bunch of different herbs together to get your organic teas. If it's just a series of steps like that, are they doing it on an individual basis? Are they doing it on a bulk basis where they're kind of working? Are there ways you can kind of like trim down the time that it costs to kind of like fill that? Presuming you have a machine as well, since you mentioned you have a couple of machines, since you mentioned factory, that probably helps in terms of bagging and sealing your teas. And then you just use these factory workers to kind of like move the whole process around. It's really looking at places where you have human interaction and looking at, can I increase this? But also you can also do things with machines that you can also improve over time by buying more efficient machines or bigger industrial machines, but I'm presuming you don't want to do that just yet. So looking at the factory workers, just looking at, is everyone having to inspect something along the chain? Is it one person that is doing it? Because if you have one person inspecting them maybe across 4 different parts of the chain, that one person has to be present at any given time across all those 4. Can I split that responsibility and have one person dedicated to one station and have them inspect, and then have another person dedicated to one station and have them inspect, kind of like following the assembly line approach, as opposed to just kind of like, I'll give a good example. It typically on a construction site, you'd see maybe if someone is carrying a block, they'll probably carry one block all the way to where they needed to get to. But sometimes it's a little more efficient to kind of like have a chain of people and then move the blocks across those individuals because they're not as tired and they're also doing it more efficiently. So if you have one person controlling so many different parts of your process, then there's an inefficiency there. And then try to see if you can have more specialized people that all they do is this specific action over and over and over again. That can probably yield you more capacity, and then you'll be able to turn out more and essentially reducing your operational cost.
Okay. Ooh, I hope you wrote that down, or just pray that Kofi puts that on Instagram, because that was everything, right? That's what you pay a consultant for. Okay. Another question. I work for a logistics company. Most of our clients are in Asia. They send packages to retailers in Ghana. Sometimes they delay one package for weeks because they can't get more orders to bring the per unit delivery cost down.
Mm-hmm.
This makes their customers in Ghana angry, and we bear the brunt of their tax. What can I do to prevent these occurrences without selling out my clients?
So there's 2 things. I think you offer tiered services if you can, even though there is if you have partners in Asia that are supposed to be sending you the product and then the delay, you can offer that as the lower tier. Hey, I can get this product for you for your Ghanaian customers, and just let them know ideally it arrives, if you're expecting it to arrive in 5 days, you can set a proper expectation based on your data that sometimes it delays as much as 3 weeks. So you can say ideally it can take 10 to 20 days based on general. You set the expectation clear initially for your clients, so that even if it does take that much time based on the data you have, then you are still they're still expecting that it could take that long. However, you can have a second tier if you have another relationship or with the same partner that you can pay for an expedited tier if the client that you have is willing to pay for it. So then you're not tying people down to the tier that has the unpredictability and the timeline, because it's kind of waiting for a general consolidated delivery. But you can also provide someone the opportunity of like, hey, I want to get this quickly and I want it guaranteed by a certain time, but it will cost more. So if you have some sort of tiered model for where that people that absolutely know time is valuable to them, they will be willing to shield out a little more cash. The people that are a little more flexible on the time would be would take the option of less cash. So it's kind of like what your exit. Which one do you want? Do you want it time or do you want it to the cost wise? So if you offer it that way to your clients, ideally those that even wanted it on time will probably, if it's absolutely not urgent, since you've clearly communicated it, they would probably say, hey, we'll go for the other option. We pray it comes on time, but we understand you've clearly communicated that that's what's going on.
Thank you. That's awesome. I see a hand here. I think it's Jedediah. He wants to speak on the fish farming thing. Okay. Hey, Jedediah, please go ahead.
All right. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes, we can.
Hi, Helen. Hi, Cyprian.
Hi.
So just a little contribution. And I would like to say, when it comes to the fish farming, it's not always about tech. I know that the question sent in was asking how they could possibly kind of do a remote monitoring of the ponds to avoid operational losses. And my guess would be the operational losses the farmhands are talking about is not really operational losses, but then they are possibly selling the fish and under-reporting the sale.
Okay.
You know, and so the best way to do that is to have someone you trust on site to, you know, monitor the sale and ensure that all the processes, the feeding, I mean, the right amount of feed is given. I mean, the feed is not sold off and said, I mean, and you know, you get complaints that, okay, yeah, we don't have enough feed for the fish. All of that will come under operational losses because you are buying more feed. And maybe your farmhands are selling off the feed and you can't even account for it. So someone needs to be on site. And that was why I gave the example of Tropo Farms. I mean, Tropo Farms, they've been in the business for quite some time. And all of the farms that I've visited around Sugakope, Akuse, Akosombo, you know, they are big farms. And if it was, you know, ideal to monitor the farm using technology, they will have invested in it because they have the money. Rather, they have someone on site whose responsibility is to monitor the activities of the farmhands to avoid, in quote, operational losses. And so the person should begin to consider that option as opposed to, you know, tech to deal with this. I mean, you could use tech in other aspects of the fish pond to ensure there's good aeration of the pond. I mean, you could even automate your feeding, you know, using tech. But when it comes to the end of it, someone needs to be there.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just the little I wanted to add. Thanks.
Thank you, Jedediah. Thank you.
No, thank you. Yeah, no, appreciate it.
Okay. So for those who joined late, today we are rapid firing Ed with operational questions, and he's doing his best to chest the bombs we are throwing. If you have any questions, all those in the Zoom session have priority over the online. So all those in the Zoom session have priority. Just raise your hand and you can ask your question directly. And then maybe you can give more context on the questions, unlike what we are receiving from online. But in the meantime, that I don't have any hands raised to ask any questions, I will go to the next question from our online participants. The next question says, are there any inventory management tools you will recommend for small scale retailers? Very simple question, I think.
No. So this kind of leads back to, and I may not know one yet off the top of my head, but there are several inventory management tools on the market. But like in our initial conversation, we had a conversation about how a lot of the products on the market are not necessarily geared towards the dynamicness of how business is done in Africa. So for the most part, it may not favor you in several different ways to use something off the shelf. But there are also a lot of African firms that are building a lot of inventory management systems, including at my firm as well. We're building one internally that we're using for the kind of inventory we want to manage internally. Some of the challenges we've seen with the ones that are already out there will be along the lines of currency options. It's limited in the currency option or payment options. There are things that can help you kind of monitor inventory alongside that I am aware of, but I think this is more of a research question in terms of seeing what's in the market. But there's invoicing or bookkeeping tools like Zoho that you can leverage alongside with maybe your Excel to kind of like keep track of the products you have and the quantities as they're going down and the sale and which one is wastage, for instance, which one is expired. But I'm certain there are things on the market. I just don't know if what we have on the market are dynamic enough for any business just yet. But a lot of the things like what was the person mentioned the business that they were looking for it for?
No, it's just small scale retailers.
Retailers, yeah. So there's different things you're looking at when you're looking at retail inventory management. It's litter sizes or cartons, or I mean, sometimes even you're portioning out, like even how you sell granites, like there's no correct measurements for them, but there needs to be a way to portion that out and understand all of those different things. And that's a tool that we're building internally called inventory as well. That's an example, but I'm sure there are other products out there in the market. I just I don't have the research in front of me to kind of like properly say what would work best for you. But it shouldn't be difficult to kind of see what's already on the market by just doing a quick Google search. And typically too, they're not affordable because it's something that they know that you really need, and it makes it a little. But things like Zoho, actually Zoho is also not free. Yeah, it's not free. Anyway, whoever this person is, they can probably reach out to me, and then we can kind of potentially pilot out what we're doing with them as well.
Please, whoever asked the question on inventory management tools, plug. I just gave you a plug. So you have to reach out to me first. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, reach out to
you can reach out and you could potentially pilot his inventory management program with you, potentially, depending on what you're looking at. The 8th question I have here is, okay, it's quite a lengthy one. All right. I manage an SME with a sizable warehouse. So that's the first part.
Okay.
We are into bolts and nuts. We sell, regroove, and sometimes manufacture special designs for clients. Our main problem is stock control to avoid stockouts. We have an inventory management POS that we use for record keeping, but it still depends on people to enter data. Do you know of any new technologies that can streamline this process and reduce downtimes?
They want to remove the reliance of people altogether,
People, yeah.
which is the ideal goal, eliminating human capital altogether. But they're selling it, is what I'm hearing, because I had the POS.
Yes.
So where are they relying on people? It's the entry of the sale.
I think both ways.
Pardon?
I think it's both ways. It says, but it still depends on people to enter data.
Okay, so maybe I think what's going on is when the sale happens, they have to actually manually reduce quantity.
Maybe. Or it could be that from my experience, it could be that when the sale happens, if somebody doesn't enter that sale, that product could leave without.
So I think that's a process problem more than the systems problem.
Okay.
You should, if you want to maintain your data online, or you want to have this inventory management system, all your sales have to go through your system. Period. That there should be no ifs, else, buts. There's no sale. There should be no sale recorded in your book if it doesn't go through your system.
So it would be some sort of blocking type of process where if it hasn't gone through the system,
Yeah, so
it shouldn't be able to leave the warehouse.
Yeah, exactly. Whoever's fulfilling that order, if they don't see this in the system, they shouldn't be able to execute on it. I think typically what happens is maybe you have familiar people and workers or managers that are like, oh, give me this real quickly. And I mean, that's not in the system, but you trust that person. You need to have a process established where regardless of who is asking for it, this is the process. That would kind of like help because the system is already in place. And that's really the added layer, and the person not even asking, that's really where inventory is really shining on. It is, you want to manage what you have in your retail store, which is the direct consumer or the wholesale store, but you also need to manage what is in your warehouse. So if you're producing and manufacturing this, you have a separate warehouse and you want to manage that inventory separate from the retail, because the quantities there are usually sometimes measured by pallets or boxes as opposed to the individual singular units that is counted in the retail or warehouse. So again, something like inventory sounds like a good product for some of these things that we're trying to track, because it also helps alerts on the general trend of your sales, and it also helps alert on the general trend on other people's sales as well, since it's designed to kind of like, and let me not get into that, but yes. If you want to maintain your process where you are able to track all your data, you just have to have a process in place that allows no one to kind of bridge that process. Because I can't fathom how there would not be a sale in the system if your system is the system in front of me. Like for instance, if you go into a Shell or a Total Energy store and you wanted to make a purchase, they have to rank it up on their system. If they don't ring it up, there's no sale. So they have an idea at any given time what exactly the sales are in the store. And at the end of the day, they just need to do a stock keeping to match that.
Okay.
And that's because they have a process in place. Do not sell anything that you don't rank up.
Okay, so it's more of a process problem, not a tech problem. Okay, so try and fix the process.
I mean, if you get rid of human beings, which is what the person was initially asking, then yes, you would probably fix that issue. But to get rid of the human beings is a little more expensive right now for our region. I mean, by getting rid of the human being, is more or less by the time the person picks up the product and they're walking out the store, their card is automatically charged without doing anything. But that's a whole different ball game.
I would love to see that. Number 9. Does operations have anything to do with cash flow management? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, but let me finish the question. If yes, the answer is yes. In what way and how can a startup manage its operations to optimize its cash flows? Wow.
So I think honestly, everything we've been talking about is cash flow. I think what we defined from the first week we spoke about is operations is everything in between getting your product to the customer. It's everything in between. So you're managing the cost of that at the end of the day. And once you can reduce your costs, you have for better yields in terms of returns. So yes, you have to always be aware of the cash flow because, for instance, I think somebody had an issue about where they said they had great demand, but they needed to know how to optimize to kind of like scale up and meet that demand. Great demand sometimes puts a bottleneck on you because you have to have the cash up front to kind of like meet that demand, right? And so if you don't have the cash up front, you're going to be screwed. You won't be able to meet that demand and you might lose that demand over time. So yes, operation is definitely a cash flow or cash management problem. So one thing you want to do as much as possible in operations is if you can control it, you can reduce as much of the cost as you can to leverage a bigger margin, so that you have more cash eventually injected. And sometimes the bigger margin also shows it makes it a little easier for you to be able to borrow money from the necessary institution to kind of meet your cash flow issues. So yeah, clearly understanding your operations also really, really helps you understand cash management because you know, for instance, if you're borrowing money, what you can realistically fulfill, like our dear country does, and what you can't realistically fulfill.
Okay. This question that I'm about to ask, I have a funny feeling it's a consultant that wrote this question. What are some best practices for operational expenses and for managing operational expenses and working capital in a small business?
And working capital in a small business. What was the question? What are the basics?
What are some best practices for managing operational expenses and working capital in a small business? Exactly. I thought the same way when I read the question. It's like, what you driving at?
When you wrote the question or when you read the question?
When I read the question. I didn't write this one.
So working capital and what was it, operational expenses? So
managing working capital and operational expenses.
Yeah, so with operational expenses, for the most part, as much that you can delay on the operational expenses, the better. So if you can negotiate with your suppliers to have delayed payments for what they supply you, the better, which is a lot of what the big companies kind of do. So as a small business, you may not have too much leverage to kind of like negotiate some of those deals. But that's one of the ways you can kind of like, because you want to delay when you have to kind of move your working capital so that presumably whatever you're producing, the turnaround for what it's yielding you catches up with your costing to produce it, to leaving you with very little need to inject capital that you do not necessarily have, right? So the question is, how do you delay the operational costs as much as possible? So some of your operational costs may be the human resource as well. So for instance, if you're paying your labor force on a daily basis and you have a working capital problem, maybe pay them bi-weekly, maybe pay them monthly. Even if it costs you maybe a couple more, if it costs you, I'm going to say X amount of money, and that works better for you, I'd say you can leverage that kind of implementation, even if it provides a better flexibility for them to retrieve it on a daily basis. Again, you look at your operation costs. What are the things costing me operationally? If at the moment, but you can buy something for so cheap, but in bulk, but that locks up your working capital, then don't go for that option. Go for the option that makes sense to you, because the working capital will kill you a lot quickly, because there's several different things that you need to do with the working capital, which includes marketing, customer acquisition, there's several different things. So you can produce the products, but if you have nothing left, what are you going to do? So even though sometimes the efficiencies are in, hey, we need to buy bulk, we need to do this, we need to be efficient, we need to get our own truck to kind of like do our own deliveries. Don't rely too much on those up front, and then just try to work within your means and slowly make those incremental gains.
Okay. So I'm going to go back to the session and give the opportunity to anybody that's still listening. You have seen all the questions that the online have asked. They have been interesting. I've learned a few things in these question and answer process. So if you have any questions listening to us, you have any contributions listening to us, just raise your hand and we'll give you the opportunity to ask your question or make your contribution. If you don't, I will continue with the last two questions. These are PBI questions. Very clearly, how can a small business ensure they are meeting regulatory compliance requirements in their operations?
Especially in Africa or in Ghana, how do you ensure that? That is an ongoing struggle. Because some of the regulation and compliance, you discover them as you go along, and sometimes people even make them up as you go along. How do you ensure?
Nah.
Honestly, this is something that has been on the forefront of my. I've been thinking about this for a minute. I don't know of any efficient way aside from just hiring someone that is relatively an expert to kind of stay on top of some of those things for you. If there's anyone that has a service that provides that guarantee, hit me up. But there's no way for you to internally ensure. You do not make those rules. You do not make those. There's no way for you to ensure it. You just need to rely on the professionals to kind of like to get that information. So if you cannot afford the professionals, then you're going to have to be that professional to seek that information constantly. And unfortunately, in our climate, these things change often and quietly.
Yes.
So there's no way that I've thought about insurance. This is definitely a business model that if anyone can stay on top of, it can easily be a subscription service that a lot of people pay to be up to date. It's kind of like what the big consultancies like KPMG and stuff kind of do for people. So on a small scale, if you do that would be perfect.
Okay. And then the last of our questions that came in earlier is, how can a small business measure their operational performance and identify areas for improvement?
Data is key. You always have to look at the metrics. So when you're looking for the data in your operational flow, you're looking at one, time. That's that's one of the data that you want to like collect. So you look at timestamps for the different aspects of your operationals and kind of like understand what those times mean to you. You look at your human resource and understand how they fit into your operations. Essentially, can you do things a little more efficiently? Do you, for instance, need 54 or do you need 10? And you have to first record the data over time. When I had 10, we were able to get this. However, when we went to 54, we've only increased by 2x. Why are we going? Like you need to have time, the human resource data. You also need to have quality data. You have to understand in general, how has my quality increased or decreased over time based on my general growth or performance necessary. You want to have the data on that as well. It's really just data centered. Once you have proper data over time, you can properly see what's going on. And also, as you're producing your goods, you're also tracking the costing of your goods, the costing of the raw materials that help yield the goods that you want, and just looking at that over time. And then if you see that trend over time, that every December corn is going up, and then you know, hey, I need to find a substitute for December or corn, or I need to find a way to store corn in bulk prior to the December, because that's going to cost me a little less if I can store it in November. And so I don't go through that in December. You just need the data over time. So just understand, what are the things, what's my business dependent on? My business is dependent on people, resources, cash, and try to plot those things in time and see what sits, and then you can start to figure out how to fine-tune those things.
And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Data, 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 data. I love data. Okay, so Ed, that was the last bit of the online questions that we had. I still don't have any hands for the Zoom session. I believe they're either very well entertained or completely confused. Either ways, I'll take it. They were here. I'll take it. We're right on time with the 1 hour, and as usual, I will hand over to you for the last bit of your thoughts on the questions that were asked, on anything that stood out to you in terms of the questions that were asked, or anything that you wanted to add on that you haven't said yet.
No, I think the last question kind of really took it home for me. To improve upon operations, you really need to understand your data on a micro level. You need to understand the different aspects of your business and try to plot against time really what is going on, and if I scale in this direction, is it actually beneficial, or do I just look busy, or am I just getting busy and not necessarily yielding anything? You just really need to look at the numbers often and regularly. There's a common misconception that we can't track everything. And yes, we cannot track everything. Like it's not, it can be finite, but you can have a good estimate on everything. And that's why the fish one is a little tricky for me, because for instance, I'm certain you can track without being present on a fish farm. I can think of ways, because for instance, the same equipment that can weigh trucks can probably be plotted to kind of weigh ponds. But the question is it cost effective for your operations? So that's really the game you play with operational investments and operational contributions and how it affects your business. Because for instance, Amazon right now has a very crazy operation going on where they have robots doing this, robots doing that. The cost and the research that goes to building out a robot doesn't make sense for some businesses. However, for them on that scale where they reach over time, the costs, I mean, there's several different factors to it. So yes, everything is trackable. You just have to understand when when it makes sense to track that item in a technology way, or to track it with labor, because sometimes labor is just cheaper. And there's a reason as well that people don't heavily rely on data in some industries in Africa, because labor is relatively cheaper. So you can just kind of like rely on them to kind of like give you that information, as opposed to some sort of centralized technology data system. But at some point in time, that will flip, where it will be less costly to track and understand the different investments you can make into your operations that would eliminate some human resources for your benefit and provide a better efficiency and quality of product. So constantly analyzing that data over time gives you a better idea of where and what can improve at what given time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Because you talked about robots, I always ask this question when I am in a room with IT people. With the new, it's not the new expansion, the new growth, the new burst in AI, and the quick adoption of AI by technology firms and other businesses. The projection is that AI is set to cost 75 million or 7.5 million jobs by the end of 2025. My question is, as a capitalist, I rely on the market having access to funds to be able to buy my goods and services. If 7.5 million people are out of jobs, where are they going to be getting funds to be able to buy the goods and services that the AI is producing? And so that's my perspective on that, is that how far is too far when it comes to AI taking over human jobs? And how does that affect the capacity of the market to purchase? Like, how does that affect the purchasing power of the market? And doesn't that in turn affect the business in the long run? Did I complicate it?
No, you didn't actually.
Okay.
My first thought will be, it's unfair to isolate AI as it's it's taking jobs away from people.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the general truth. Technology is always going to simplify something and make the people that were doing that obsolete.
Mm-hmm.
It happens everywhere. For instance, we don't have as many people that wear horses anymore to push carriages anymore, because we drive cars, right?
Yeah.
But nobody is worried about where their jobs went to today. But we have a lot of drivers now, right? So really what happens is what is more important is training and education, as some jobs become easier for technology to accomplish, other jobs open up. So the question is, in general, is our market or our working class being efficiently trained for the other jobs that are available? For instance, maybe we used to build bicycles, or we used to be, maybe we used to build bicycles. Now, with people, let's say not enough people riding bicycles, how many of those people can be transferred over to like a factory that works with metal in general and just learn a different set for the same skill set? It's really just that training component. AI and technology in general is always going to kind of like make some jobs redundant. But even AI is going to create a job on top of it, because someone needs to learn to communicate with AI, which is what they're calling prompt engineers now.
Prompt engineers, yeah.
But so the challenge is not looking at technology. We want technology to kind of take away mundane tasks, right? We want technology to take away mundane. Good story. My grandma used to ice water. Used to kind of like make ice water back in the day, where it comes out of the poly tank and then you tie it up and then you put it away. We used to help her with that, right? granted, policy and technology came such that people were able to produce sachet water in a larger quantity, that it wasn't necessary for that. And even though it was still relatively cheaper, that's just a policy as well. You can argue that took away all those jobs, but there's still jobs created where people still have to bag, and it's a transferable skill. Where people that were bagging these as well may still be able to bag and move distance around. There's still a job in that aspect where people are still having to sell them. I mean, yes, there's going to be new jobs, old jobs taken away. But for instance, phones have come and made a lot of things obsolete, but they've also created a lot of jobs. I think what you're talking about specifically is unskilled or general labor. And even in the essence of skilled labor, I think it makes your work even easier. AI right now is targeting a lot of relatively skilled labor than unskilled labor. So I think they're safe. Robotics is heavily targeting like skilled labor as well. Unskilled labor, that's a problem more so for governments. I think they really need to find a way to focus on educational systems to increase the output of like great human capital, to reduce how many people that can only work with their hands and not adapt to other forms of labor.
Okay, so retraining. So where AI is taking away jobs, we are retraining them for jobs
Like,
created by AI.
We would all love it. For instance, Kente. Kente takes a long time to make. It's still very manual of process. If someone comes in place with a way to create Kente where it takes a 3D scan of your design and makes the Kente, and you're having your wedding, you don't have to worry about anyone delaying you in your Kente. Oof, how many Kentes can be made in a day? I mean, that's beautiful. It takes away jobs, but that's what we're trying to do as humans, improve.
Okay, thank you. Very well executed. Very well executed. I've had very interesting reactions to this question, so very well executed. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been PBI. It's been an hour and 19 minutes. We've taken 19 minutes away from Ed's time, and I have to let him go. Ed, thank you so much for today. Thank you for the rapid answers to the rapid questions, and also thank you for the thoughts you've left us with, especially when it comes to operations management and the role that data management plays in that. Next week, we'll be having the summary session where we'll be talking about the summary of what our journey with Ed over the period, talking about operations and operations management in Africa. And how small businesses, SMEs, managers, business owners can take advantage of the opportunities that are in best practice operations management to stand out from the crowd. Remember, Ed said that your output determines what you put in. So if your operations is going well, it will show in your output. In the meantime, between now and next week, I will try and catch Ed, and then we will, like we always do, prepare our operations plan or strategy for the donut business that we have been tracking over this period. And then next week, in our summary, we'll show you our operations strategy for the donut business, to give you a case study of what operations can do for a business. Okay. So ladies and gentlemen, it's been fun having you. It's 8:20. As usual, I'm Ellie, and this is PBI. We are hoping to change Africa by mentoring the African people to change the continent. I will see you next week. Ed, thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you so much as well.
Okay, bye-bye.